I will drag you out of this garage by your hair if you do not start walking." The words bounce off concrete pillars and fade into the steady hum of the fluorescent lights. A woman stands between a gray sedan and a white pickup truck, her hand frozen on the strap of her leather bag. She is black, in her mid-40s, wearing a cream blouse tucked into navy slacks. No jewelry except a thin watch. No makeup except a trace of lipstick. The man who spoke towers over her at 6'2", with a neck that strains against his collar. He blocks the path to the elevator. Behind him, a woman with ash blonde hair clutches a designer purse to her chest like a shield. Her lips move silently, rehearsing something. The black woman does not step back, does not raise her voice, does not reach for her phone. She says, "I am walking to the elevator. You are in my way." The man, Grant Hollister though she does not know his name yet, laughs. It is not a pleasant sound. It is the laugh of someone who has never been told no by a woman who looks like her. "You do not belong here," he says. "This is courthouse parking. Authorized personnel only." You see a sign anywhere that says loitering permitted. I see a sign that says court visitors and authorized personnel are permitted during operating hours. I am a court visitor, his wife, Leila Hollister, the kind of woman who sends back salads, steps forward. Her voice carries that particular pitch of performed fear. "Grant, she is not leaving. Call security." "I am calling 911. The black woman watches Leila's fingers move across her phone screen. She notes the slight tremor in the wife's hand. Adrenaline, not fear. She notes that the husband has moved closer, close enough that she can smell coffee on his breath, close enough that his shadow falls across her face. Somewhere above them, a courtroom sits empty. The nameplate on the bench reads Judge Kendra Whitaker, but that is a detail that will matter later. Right now, in this garage, Kendra is just a black woman who parked in the wrong space. Leila Hollister's 911 call connects. The recording will later be entered into evidence, Exhibit 7A, authenticated by the Miami-Dade dispatch supervisor. The relevant portion reads as follows: Dispatcher, Miami-Dade 911. What is your emergency? Caller, there is a black woman in the courthouse parking garage. She is acting suspicious and she will not leave. My husband is trying to get her to leave. Mum, slow down. Is she threatening you? She is standing there aggressively. She will not tell us why she is here. We asked her nicely and she has an attitude. Can you send someone? She might be casing cars. Dispatcher, is she attempting to enter any vehicles? Caller, not yet, but she is looking around. You know how they do? Please, we do not feel safe. The call lasts a couple of minutes. During that time, Kendra Whitaker does not move, does not speak, does not give them anything they can use. She waits, and above her, her courtroom waits too. The morning had started the way all of Judge Kendra Whitaker's morning started, in silence. No alarm. Her body simply knew. Her time on the bench had trained her better than any clock ever could. She rose in the dark, made coffee with precisely 2 tablespoons of grounds, and drank it standing at her kitchen window while the sky shifted from black to gray. Her clothes hung in the closet exactly as she had arranged them the night before. Blouse on the left hanger, slacks on the right, shoes aligned beneath, toes pointing forward. It was a habit she had developed long before law school, back when she was the daughter of a career Army sergeant who believed that discipline started with your dresser drawers. She dressed without turning on the overhead light, applied lipstick by feel, gathered her files, and arranged them in her bag in order of docket number. She did not need to check. She always knew. She was in her car, approached the courthouse, discovered that the judge's reserved lot was blocked by a construction crane and trucks bearing the logo of Hollister and Sons Commercial Contracting. She circled once, Twice? The construction foreman waved her away. Fine. Public garage it was. She parked on the level, in space to 47, and sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel. The garage was quiet. A few cars scattered across the concrete like afterthoughts. The elevator hummed somewhere in the distance. She gathered her bag, checked her watch, and stepped out of her sedan. That was when she noticed the white pickup truck a few spaces down. That was when she saw the couple inside watching her through the windshield. That was when the woman pointed and the man's door swung open. And that was when everything went wrong. If you have ever been judged before anyone knew your name, you already know what comes next. Stay with me. Shock. Grant Hollister had not planned to confront anyone that morning. He had planned to arrive at the courthouse, plead no contest to a speeding ticket, pay his fine, and be back at the job site. Simple, clean, the kind of minor inconvenience that men like him erased with money and moved on from without memory. But then he saw her, a black woman, alone in a parking garage in the early morning, moving slowly, checking her surroundings, carrying a bag that could hold anything. His wife saw her too. Grant, look at her. She is casing cars. He watched the woman walk toward the elevator, confident, unhurried, like she belonged. That was the part that bothered him. Not her presence, her confidence. I will handle it, he said, and he believed he would. Kendra Whitaker saw him coming before he reached her. She had spent her time on the bench reading body language. The nervous defendant, the lying witness, the attorney about to lose his temper. She knew what aggression looked like before it announced itself. This man was announcing himself loudly. She adjusted her grip on her bag, shifted her weight slightly back, kept her face neutral. Excuse me, his voice was the kind that expected attention. You need to leave. I am sorry. This garage is for courthouse personnel, authorized people. You need to leave. She looked past him to the sign mounted on the concrete pillar. White letters on blue. I am a court visitor, she said, within posted hours. Court visitor. He repeated it like she had said something absurd. What kind of court business? The kind that is none of your business. Behind him, Leela made a sound. Half gasp, half scoff. The performative shock of a woman who had never been spoken to directly by someone who looked like Kendra Whitaker. Grant, she is being hostile. I am being clear, Kendra said. There is a difference. Grant stepped closer, close enough that she could see the veins in his neck, close enough that his shadow fell across her face. Let me make something clear to you, he said. My company built half the structures in this county. I know every judge, every clerk, every security guard in this building, and I have never seen you before. So either you show me some identification, or I make one phone call and you are explaining yourself to the police. Kendra felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear, something older, something she had learned to carry when she was a child and a store clerk followed her through the aisles. Something she had refined when a law school professor asked if she was there too clean. Something that had calcified into armor by the time she took the bench and defense attorneys questioned whether she could be impartial. She let the silence stretch. Then she said, I am under no legal obligation to present identification in a public parking structure. The posted notice permits court visitors. I am a court visitor. That is the extent of what I owe you. Her voice did not rise. Her hands did not shake. She spoke the way she spoke from the bench, measured, precise, final. Grant's face darkened. You think you are smart, he said, reading signs, quoting rules. You think that makes you belong here. I do not need to belong. I need to get to the elevator. You are in my way. She stepped forward. He did not move. The shove happened. Kendra would later describe it in her incident report with clinical precision. Subject grabbed my left arm above the elbow, twisted, and pushed me backward into the concrete pillar behind the space. The back of my head made contact with the pillar. My bag fell. My files scattered. What she would not describe, what she would never put into words, was the sound of her skull against concrete, the hollow thud that seemed to echo through the empty garage, the ringing in her ears that lasted longer than she expected. She did not fall. She caught herself against the pillar, one hand flat against rough concrete, the other still clutching her phone. Her files lay scattered across the garage floor. Manila folders, a leather planner, her reading glasses, one lens cracked. Grant stood over her. "Now," he said, "are you going to leave or do I need to help you?" Kendra looked at him, at his flushed face, at his raised hand, at his wife standing back, phone pressed to her ear, already speaking to someone. 911. Security. It did not matter. She unlocked her phone with her thumb. "What are you doing?" Grant's voice sharpened. "Calling 911. My wife already called. They are sending someone. Then there will be 2 calls." Her finger found the numbers. "Mine will have a different story." She pressed dial. The phone rang once, twice. Miami-Dade 911. "What is your emergency?" "I am in the courthouse parking garage, near space to 47. I have just been assaulted by a white male, approximately 6'2", 220 pounds, wearing a blue polo shirt. He shoved me into a concrete pillar. His wife is present and has called 911 with what I expect will be a contradictory account." Grant released her wrist like it burned him. "You are lying," he said. "You attacked me. Leila saw it. She will tell them. She will tell them what she wants them to believe." Kendra lowered the phone, but did not end the call. Whether they believe her is a different question. The elevator chimed. All 3 of them turned. The doors opened. A man stepped out, khaki uniform, badge on his chest, the word security stitched above his pocket. Kendra read his name tag, Victor Harlan. She read his expression, decision already made. He looked at Grant, looked at Leila, looked at Kendra standing against the pillar, files scattered around her feet, phone in her hand. He walked toward her. "Ma'am," he said, "I am going to need you to step over here." Victor Harlan had been courthouse security supervisor for years. He had seen everything: drunk defendants, crying families, attorneys who threw punches in hallways. He had learned to read situations in seconds and resolve them in minutes. This situation read clearly. White couple, well-dressed, the man's face red with righteous anger. Black woman, disheveled, files on the ground, clearly the instigator. "Ma'am," he repeated, gesturing toward the far wall. "Step over here while I sort this out. I have already called 911. The woman said, "My call is logged. I would like to make a formal report. We will get to that. First, let us separate everyone and calm down." "I am calm. I have been calm. I was assaulted while standing in a public parking structure." Harlan glanced at Grant, at Leila, at the files scattered across the ground. "Sir, can you tell me what happened?" Grant's voice came out controlled now, reasonable, the voice of a man who understood how these things worked. "We were walking to the courthouse when we noticed this woman behaving suspiciously, checking cars, looking around. My wife felt uncomfortable, so I approached and asked if she needed help. She became aggressive, hostile. When I tried to de-escalate, she grabbed my arm. I defended myself. That is not what happened," Kendra said. Harlan held up a hand. "Ma'am, I will take your statement in a moment. You will take it now, or you will take it from the officers when they arrive. No one needs to involve police in a simple misunderstanding. It is not simple, and it is not a misunderstanding." Kendra's voice did not rise, but something in it shifted, hardened. "A man assaulted me, grabbed my arm, shoved me into a pillar. His wife called 911 and reported me as a suspicious person. I have a bruise forming on my arm and a possible contusion on the back of my head. That is not a misunderstanding. That is battery under Florida Statute 784.03. Harlan blinked. Grant shifted his weight. Leela's grip tightened on her phone. Something passed between the three of them. Husband, wife, security guard. Something Kendra recognized. The silent recalibration of people who had underestimated their target. "Ma'am," Harlan said, his voice careful now, "let us not make this bigger than it needs to be. I am not making it anything. I am describing what happened. Whether it becomes big depends entirely on how you respond." She bent down and began gathering her files one by one. Methodical, unhurried, as if she had all the time in the world. Grant watched her, his hands opened and closed at his sides. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "Leela, let us go. We have a hearing." "Sir," Harlan's voice stopped him. "I will need you to wait until I have documented the incident." "Document what?" "She attacked me. You have a bruise forming." "Sir." Grant's face went very still. "That is what I thought." Harlan turned back to Kendra. "Ma'am, I am going to need your name for the report." She straightened. Her files were gathered. Her glasses, cracked lens and all, were back in her bag. "Kendra Whitaker," she said. "Whitaker, and you are here for court business." "I am." "What kind?" She met his eyes, held them. "The kind I will discuss with the officers when they arrive." The officers did not arrive. Harlan's body camera, badge number 4417, footage later retrieved under discovery, recorded what happened next. Harlan. Dispatch. This is Harlan at the parking level. Situation is code for handled. No unit needed. Dispatcher. Copy that. Canceling dispatch. The call lasted seconds. Kendra heard it. She heard him cancel the response to her 911 call. She heard him decide that whatever she had experienced did not warrant police involvement. "You canceled my dispatch," she said. "I assessed the situation. It is handled. It is not handled. I was assaulted. I want to file a report. You can file a report with courthouse administration. 3rd floor. I will note the incident in my log." "Your log?" "Yes." Ma single quotes am. She looked at him, at his face arranged in professional neutrality, at his hand resting on his radio, at the way he had positioned himself between her and the Hollisters. "Yes, but also between her and the elevator not protecting her, containing her. I would like your badge number from my records," she said. "It is on my uniform." "Ma'am." 4417. "And your supervisor's name." Asterisk something flickered in his eyes, the first sign of uncertainty. "That would be Captain Ray's. But I do not think—" "Thank you." She adjusted her bag on her shoulder. "I will be filing a formal complaint. You will receive notice." She walked past him, past Grant, who stood frozen, his face unreadable, past Leela, whose phone hung loose at her side. She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened immediately. She stepped inside, turned, faced them all. "By the way," she said, "you should know something about the sign you cited. Florida Statute 810.09 requires posted notice and refusal to leave. I was never asked to leave until you demanded it, and by then you had already committed assault." The doors began to close. "Have a good day in court," she said. The last thing she saw was Grant Hollister's face. He looked like a man who had just realized he might have made a very expensive mistake. The thing about bullies is they only remember what they did when it is too late. Keep watching. The 3rd floor of the Miami-Dade County Courthouse smelled like old files and fresh anxiety. Kendra walked past the metal detectors, nodded to the bailiff, who waved her through without checking her bag, and turned left toward court administration. Her head throbbed, a low, persistent pulse at the base of her skull where it had struck the pillar. She would need to have it checked. Later, after she filed the report, The intake office was a beige room with fluorescent lights and a counter staffed by a woman in her 30s. Her name tag read Elena Park, Administrative Specialist. "Good morning," Kendra said. "I need to file an incident report." Elena looked up. Her eyes moved across Kendra's face, her rumpled blouse, the scuff on her sleeve. "What kind of incident?" "Assault in the parking garage approximately 20 minutes ago." Elena's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "And you are Kendra Whitaker." Something shifted in Elena's expression. A flicker of recognition quickly suppressed. "I see. And you are visiting the courthouse today." "I am attending to court business." "Which courtroom?" "That is not relevant to the incident report." Elena's mouth thinned. "Ma'am, these reports can get complicated for everyone involved. Are you sure you want to proceed?" Kendra felt the cold thing in her chest grow colder. "I was assaulted," she said. "I have a bruise forming on my arm and possible head trauma. A security supervisor canceled my 911 dispatch without taking my statement. I am absolutely certain I want to proceed." "I am just saying I know what you are saying." Kendra leaned forward slightly. "I am saying something different." Date of incident: today's date. Time: early morning. Location: parking structure, near space to 47. Assailant: white male, approximately 6'2", 220 pounds, blue polo shirt. His wife was present and made a false 911 report. Security Supervisor Victor Harlan. Badge number 4417. Canceled police dispatch and failed to take my statement. I want all of that documented. Elena typed slowly, her fingers moving across the keys with the enthusiasm of someone filling out their own termination paperwork. "And what exactly do you allege happened?" "I do not allege. I am reporting." The male subject grabbed my left arm, twisted it, and shoved me backward into a concrete pillar. I struck my head on impact. My belongings were scattered. I called 911 during the assault. "Did you provoke the confrontation in any way?" Kendra's hand flattened on the counter. "I walked toward an elevator while black." "Is that what you mean?" Elena's face went red. "I have to ask these questions. It is standard. Then ask them, but write down my answers exactly as I give them." "I did not provoke. I did not escalate. I was standing in a public parking structure, holding my bag, walking to an elevator. I was stopped, accused of trespassing, and assaulted when I declined to present identification." Elena's typing grew faster. "I will need your contact information for follow-up." Kendra provided it. "Phone number, address, email, and your connection to the courthouse for our records." Kendra paused. In her mind, she saw two paths. The first, reveal her position. Watch Elena's face change. Watch the entire machinery of the courthouse shift into damage control mode. The second, remain silent. See how far the system would go to dismiss her. She chose the second. "I am connected to court business," she said. "That is sufficient for your records." "Mum, when can I expect confirmation that this report has been filed?" Elena hesitated. "Reports are reviewed by the administrative supervisor within 72 hours. You will receive written confirmation after that." 72 hours. Standard procedure. Kendra straightened. "I understand standard procedure," she said. "I also understand that security footage in the parking structure auto-deletes after 72 hours. Administrative Order 2914. Section 4B if that footage is not preserved before deletion. I will be filing a supplemental complaint for spoliation of evidence." Elena's mouth opened, closed. "I will flag it for immediate review. Please do." Kendra turned and walked out of the office. Behind her, she heard Elena pick up the phone. "Captain Reyes, this is Elena in admin. We have a situation." The situation was about to become significantly more complicated. Minutes after the assault, Judge Kendra Whitaker took the bench in courtroom 6A. She had stopped in the judge's private restroom, to examine her injuries. The bruise on her arm had darkened to purple, for distinct marks where Grant's fingers had dug in. The back of her head was tender, but not bleeding. She would file a medical report later with photographs. For now, she had a docket to manage. She slipped into her robes, black, familiar, armor of a different kind, and entered the courtroom through the rear door. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The 11th Judicial Circuit Court of Miami-Dade County is now in session. The Honorable Kendra Whitaker presiding." She took her seat, arranged her files, looked out at the courtroom. Attorneys shuffled papers. Defendants sat with their families. A court reporter positioned her hands over the stenotype. Normal routine. Another morning, except for the bruise hidden beneath her sleeve, except for the incident report sitting on Ailna Park's desk, except for the man named Grant Hollister, who was at that very moment sitting in another courtroom, waiting for his traffic hearing, utterly unaware that the woman he had shoved into a pillar was now wearing judicial robes 3 doors down. Kendra called the first case. Matter of State versus Williams. "Is counsel ready to proceed?" The morning began. In the other courtroom, Grant Hollister fidgeted in the hard wooden chair. His traffic hearing was scheduled. It was now later. The judge, a balding man with glasses and a voice like gravel, was working through cases with the speed of a glacier. Leela sat beside him, scrolling through her phone. "I still cannot believe that woman," she whispered. "The nerve talking to us like that. Drop it." "I am just saying." She was clearly disturbed. "Did you see how she reacted?" "Total overreaction." Grant said nothing. He was replaying the moment in his mind. The way she had stood there, calm, unafraid. The way she had quoted the statute. The way she had looked at him when the elevator doors closed. Something about it bothered him. Not guilt. Grant Hollister did not feel guilt about confronting suspicious people in parking garages. He felt righteous, protective. He had been protecting his wife, protecting the courthouse, protecting the natural order of things. But something about the way that woman had looked at him. "Hollister," the court clerk called. "Matter of traffic citation." He stood, adjusted his tie, walked to the defendant's table. Minutes later, he pleaded no contest, paid his fine, and walked out of the courtroom with Leela at his side. "That was painless," Leela said. "Let us go home." They walked toward the lobby, past the metal detectors, past the security desk where a different officer sat. "Not Harlan?" Leela paused at the bank of monitors on the wall, 6 screens each showing a different courtroom. Channel 7 courthouse feed playing silently. "Grant." "What?" She was pointing at monitor 3. A woman in black robes sat at the bench reviewing papers. She looked up briefly straight into the camera before turning to address someone off-screen. Grant felt his stomach drop. "That is her from the garage." "That is her. Holy cow. That is the woman from the garage." He grabbed Leela's arm and pulled her closer to the monitor. The chyron at the bottom of the screen scrolled past. Judge Kendra Whitaker presiding, motion hearing docket. Leela whispered, "She is a judge." Grant did not answer. He was watching the woman on the screen. The same woman who had stood in front of him in a parking garage wearing slacks and a cream blouse holding a leather bag. The same woman he had grabbed by the arm. The same woman he had shoved into a concrete pillar. The same woman who was now wearing judicial robes and presiding over a courtroom. "We need to leave," he said. "Now, Grant, now." They left the courthouse at a near run. Behind them on monitor 3, Judge Kendra Whitaker continued her morning docket. She did not know they had seen her. Not yet. The news reached Kendra later that morning. She had just finished a suppression hearing. Defendant's motion denied. Evidence admitted when her judicial assistant knocked on her chamber's door. "Judge Whitaker, there is a Victor Harlan from security here to see you." Kendra set down her pen. "Send him in." Harlan entered the chambers like a man walking into a minefield. His earlier confidence was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like fear. "Judge Whittaker," he said, "I did not realize. This morning in the garage, I had no idea who you were, and if you had," she faltered, "would you have taken my statement? Would you have dispatched a unit? Would you have treated me differently if you had known I was a judge?" That is not, because I am curious about your answer. Mr. Harlan, I am curious whether you are telling me that your treatment of victims depends on their professional status, because if so, that is a troubling admission. Harlan's face had gone pale. "I came to apologize," he said, "for any misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding. There is an incident report on file. There is a request for footage preservation. There is a 911 call with your voice-canceling police dispatch. Judge Whittaker, I am not speaking to you as Judge Whittaker. I am speaking to you as Kendra Whittaker, victim of battery, whose complaint was dismissed by a security supervisor who made assumptions about her credibility based on her appearance." Harlan stood very still. "What happens now?" Kendra leaned back in her chair. Now you go back to your post. You wait for internal affairs to contact you. You retain counsel if you think it is warranted, and you think very carefully about how you document this conversation in your personal notes, because I will be documenting it in mine." He left without another word. Hours passed. That is how long it took for the system to start protecting itself. But she was not done. Not even close. The Hollisters' attorney was named Damon Voss. He was in his 50s, Yale Law, partner at a firm, and he had built a career on making problems disappear for clients who could afford discretion. Grant Hollister had been his client for years. Contract disputes, zoning issues, the occasional aggressive negotiation that required legal cleanup. This was different. "You assaulted a sitting judge," Voss said, closing his office door. "In a courthouse parking garage with your wife as a witness who called 911 to report the victim as suspicious." Grant sat in the leather chair across from Voss's desk. His face was gray. "I did not know who she was. That is not a defense. That is an aggravating factor. You assaulted a black woman because you assumed she did not belong. That she happened to be a judge makes your liability worse, not better." "What do I do?" Voss sat down, steepled his fingers. "First, we get ahead of this. I will file a motion in your traffic case preserved on the record, claiming that a courthouse visitor engaged in provocative conduct that caused you to respond defensively. It will not win, but it creates an alternative narrative. Will that work? It will muddy the waters. Right now, the only account in the official record is whatever she told the intake officer. We need a competing story. Leela's 911 call is a disaster. She described a black woman standing aggressively. That is going to play very badly in front of any jury, any judge, any reporter who gets hold of it." Grant's hands gripped the armrests. "So, what do we do?" Voss smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. "We do what we always do. We make this complicated. We make it expensive. We make her decide whether pursuing this is worth the scrutiny. She is a judge. She deals with scrutiny every day. She is a judge who was assaulted while walking to work in plain clothes. She filed a complaint with courthouse administration, not the police. She is being careful, strategic. That means she has something to protect." "What?" Voss leaned forward. "That is what we need to find out." The next hours unfolded with the slow inevitability of a system protecting its own. Local news station ran a headline: "Courthouse altercation. Both sides claim assault." The story was thin. No names, no details, but it included a description. Black woman, late 40s, professional appearance. Elena Park left a voicemail on Kendra's personal phone. "Judge Whittaker, this is Elena from admin. I wanted to let you know that your incident report has been flagged for review. Captain Reyes will be in touch. Captain Reyes did not call. Kendra received an email from an address she did not recognize. Subject line: Re Hollister matter. The email was not addressed to her. It was forwarded accidentally or intentionally. Impossible to say from a chain between Voss and someone whose name had been redacted. The visible portion read: if she is courthouse staff, we can argue selective enforcement. Discovery should be interesting. Kendra read the email several times. Then she called her former law school classmate, Felicia Conwo, who had left the bench years ago to practice civil rights law. Felicia, I need a favor. Name it. I was assaulted this morning in the courthouse garage. The man's attorney is already filing motions. I need someone to preserve evidence before it disappears. Silence on the line. Then you want to file suit. I want options. I want someone who is not afraid of discovery. You know what this will mean for your career, for your privacy. I know exactly what it will mean. Another silence. Longer this time. I will file the preservation request tonight, Felicia said. Footage auto-deletes after 72 hours. We have until morning. I will have it done in 24 hours. Thank you, Felicia. Felicia's voice softened. Are you okay? Kendra looked at her arm, at the bruise that had darkened from purple to black, at the four-finger-shaped marks that would photograph beautifully for an evidence file. I will be, she said. She hung up and she began to prepare. The next morning, Kendra arrived at the courthouse at her usual time, but she did not go to the parking garage. She parked blocks away in a public lot and walked. The reserved judge's lot was still blocked by construction. Hollister and Sons Commercial Contracting. She noted the irony, did not smile. Her chambers were quiet. Her judicial assistant had not yet arrived. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, and began to build her file. First, photographs. She removed her blouse, stood in front of the mirror on the back of her door, and documented the bruise from multiple angles. Left arm, anterior view. Left arm, lateral view. Close-up showing finger impression. She uploaded the images to a secure folder time-stamped automatically by the system. Second, the 911 call. She had requested a copy from dispatch. Standard procedure available to any complainant. The recording arrived in her email. She listened to it twice. Her voice on the recording was calm, precise, professional, the voice of someone who had done this before. Third, Harlan's body camera. This would require discovery. Felicia had filed the preservation request. The footage would be held until the matter was resolved, but viewing it would have to wait. Fourth, the email. Voss's forwarded email sat in her inbox like a confession. If she is courthouse staff, we can argue selective enforcement. Not if she is innocent. Not if she was wrongly accused. If she is courthouse staff. The assumption baked in. Of course she was guilty of something. The only question was how to leverage it. She printed the email, placed it in her file. Fifth, prior complaints. This would require a public records request of any previous complaints against Security Supervisor Victor Harlan. She drafted the request, addressed it to the Office of Public Records, and saved it for filing. Sixth, medical documentation. She had scheduled an appointment with her personal physician. The examination would be documented. The findings would be photographed. The chain of custody would be established. By mid-morning, her file was organized. Her evidence was preserved. Her next steps were clear. Her judicial assistant knocked on the door. Judge Whitaker, you have a visitor. Chief Judge Harlan Brinkley. Kendra closed her laptop. Send him in. Harlan Brinkley had been Chief Judge of the 11th Circuit for years. He was silver-haired and possessed of a gravitas that filled every room he entered. He had mentored Kendra when she was a new judge. He had recommended her for appellate panels. He had written glowing performance reviews that sat in her personnel file. He was also at this moment asking her to make the whole thing disappear. "Kendra," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "This garage situation. It is unfortunate. Unfortunate. A man lost his temper. A misunderstanding escalated. These things happen. A man assaulted me in our courthouse. That is what happened." Brinkley spread his hands. "A man shoved a woman he did not recognize in a parking garage in the early morning, where anyone might be." The words hung in the air. "Where anyone might be," Kendra repeated. "You mean where anyone? Black might be and might be questioned and might be assaulted because she did not look like she belonged. That is not what I am saying. It is exactly what you are saying." Brinkley's expression shifted. The avuncular manner faded. Something harder emerged. "I am saying that pursuing this will create a spectacle, media attention, discovery, depositions, your name in the papers, your past cases scrutinized, defense attorneys looking for any angle to claim you are biased. Is that what you want?" "What I want is to do my job without being assaulted in the parking garage." "And you can. This can be resolved quietly. Hollister makes a donation to a charity of your choice. His attorney drafts an apology. Harlan receives a written reprimand. Everyone moves on. And the next black woman who walks through that garage." Brinkley paused. "What about her? The next woman who parks in the wrong lot. The next visitor who does not look like she belongs. What happens to her, Kendra? Because if I accept a quiet resolution, I am telling Harlan that his assumptions were acceptable. I am telling the Hollisters that a fine and an apology letter is the price of assaulting a black woman. I am telling everyone who works in this building that their safety depends on their professional status, not their humanity." She stood, walked to her window, looked out at the Miami skyline, at the construction cranes that dotted the horizon, at the world that kept building itself without asking who got crushed beneath the foundations. "I filed an incident report," she said. "I have requested preservation of the security footage. I have submitted a public records request for prior complaints against Harlan, and I have retained counsel." Behind her, she heard Brinkley exhale. "You are making this personal. It became personal when he grabbed my arm. You are going to war with the institution you serve." She turned to face him. "I am holding the institution accountable to its own standards." "There is a difference." Brinkley stood. His face was unreadable. "I hope you know what you are doing," he said. "I hope you are prepared for what comes next." "I have been preparing for this my whole life," she said. "I just did not know it until this morning." He left without another word. The first document arrived in the afternoon. It was delivered to Kendra's chambers by courthouse inner office mail, a manila envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of a personnel file, heavily redacted, but one section was visible. Complainant redacted. Black female, age 34, courthouse visitor. Incident date, earlier. Subject, Security Supervisor Victor Harlan, badge number 4417. Allegation, discriminatory treatment during routine security screening. Complainant alleged subject made comments regarding her appearance and questioned her presence in judge's chambers waiting area despite valid appointment. Disposition, insufficient evidence of discriminatory intent. Recommendation, verbal counseling, no formal discipline. Signed, redacted, HR Director. Kendra read it twice. Then she turned the paper over. On the back, handwritten in blue ink, there are 2 more. Ask the right questions. No signature. She sat very still. Someone inside the courthouse, someone with access to HR files had sent her this. Someone who wanted her to know that Harlan had done this before. Someone who wanted her to ask questions that would lead to more complaints, more victims, more patterns. The question was who and why. Now the public records response arrived. Several prior complaints against Security Supervisor Victor Harlan, all from Black courthouse visitors, all marked resolved. No action. Kendra assembled the documents in her file. The public records response, the anonymous photocopy, the email chain, the 911 recordings, the incident report, and then she noticed something. One of the complaints, the black attorney who had been asked for additional identification. The attorney's name was partially visible, blacked out, but not completely obscured. Kendra held the paper up to the light. She could make out letters. O.K.O. Felicia Conwell, her former law school classmate, her current attorney. Felicia had filed a complaint against Harlan months ago. Felicia had never mentioned it? Kendra called her that afternoon. Why did you not tell me? Silence on the line. Kendra, I read the complaint. You filed against Harlan months before he dismissed my complaint, and you never said a word. Would it have changed anything? Asterisk, it would have told me I was not alone. More silence then. I did not tell you because I was ashamed. I am a civil rights attorney. I fight these cases every day, and when it happened to me, I let it go. I let them tell me it was inconclusive. I let them bury it because I did not want to be the woman who made trouble. You are not making trouble now. I am helping you make trouble. That is different. Felicia's voice hardened. And Kendra, there is something else. What? The anonymous envelope you received, the HR file. I do not know who sent it, but I have a guess. Who? Someone who has been keeping track. Someone who has been waiting for the right case, the right complainant. Someone inside the courthouse who can access personnel files without leaving a trail. Kendra thought about it. Who had access? HR staff, administrative supervisors, judicial assistants. Do you have a name? Not yet, but I am looking. A pause. Kendra, whoever sent that envelope is taking a serious risk. If they are discovered, they lose their job. Maybe worse. They are doing this because they believe in what you are doing. Do not let them down. I will not. She hung up, and she looked at the documents spread across her desk. The complaints, the patterns, the system protecting itself. Someone inside that system had decided to help her. The question was whether that someone could be trusted or whether they were setting a trap. The second anonymous delivery arrived later. This time the envelope contained 3 items. First, an email printout dated months earlier. Sender Victor Harlan, recipient redacted. Subject re-incident protocol. The visible portion read, let them file the complaint. Let them feel heard. Then mark it resolved and move on. Nobody reads the archives. Nobody cares about patterns. We just need to make sure the right people never see the wrong files. Second, a handwritten note on courthouse stationery. 4 words. The right person is watching. Third, a business card, plain white. No name, just a phone number, and 2 words printed in small black letters. Internal Affairs. Kendra stared at the business card. Someone was guiding her step by step, complaint by complaint, building a case not just against Harlan, but against the system that had protected him. The question remained, who and what did they want? She picked up her phone, dialed the number. It rang twice. Internal Affairs Investigator Renata Assay speaking. This is Judge Kendra Whitaker. I received your card. A pause then. Judge Whitaker, I have been expecting your call. Renata Assay was in her 40s and had spent years investigating corruption in law enforcement agencies across South Florida. She had joined the Judicial Qualifications Commission years ago after a case involving a sheriff's deputy who had been extorting defendants' families. She met Kendra at a coffee shop blocks from the courthouse. Neutral ground. No recordings. I did not send the envelope. Renata said before Kendra could ask, but I know who did. Who? Someone I have been working with for months. Someone who has been documenting Harlan's pattern long before you walked into that garage. A source, a witness, multiple witnesses actually, but none of them willing to come forward. Until now. Kendra sat down her coffee cup. What changed? You did. Renata leaned forward. Judge Whitaker, do you understand what you represent to the people who work in that courthouse? To the clerks, the bailiffs, the administrative staff who have watched Harlan operate for years. You are a sitting judge. You have power, protection, a platform. If you file a complaint and it gets buried, that is one thing. If you file a complaint and it leads to accountability, that changes everything. I am one person. You are a symbol. The right person in the right position at the right moment. Renata paused. The question is, are you willing to be used? Used? How? I have been building a case against Harlan for years. Several complaints on file? Yes, but there are at least 7 more that were never officially reported. Women who were too afraid, too discouraged, too beaten down to put their names on paper. If you pursue your complaint aggressively, publicly, they might come forward. They might finally feel safe enough to speak. And if they do not, then you are alone. One judge against a security supervisor with years of seniority and a union that will fight to protect him. Kendra thought about it, about the bruise on her arm, about the email chain from Voss, about Brinkley's voice telling her to make it all disappear. What do you need from me? Renata smiled. It was not a triumphant smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting a very long time. I need you to keep pushing. File the formal complaint with Internal Affairs. Request a disciplinary hearing. Make enough noise that the other witnesses feel safe coming forward. And in return, I make sure your complaint does not get buried. I make sure the right people see the right files. I make sure the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Kendra picked up her coffee cup, took a long sip. The anonymous source, she said. The person sending the envelopes. Are they safe for now? But if this goes public, that changes. They will have to make a choice. What choice? Renata's eyes met hers. The same choice you are making, whether to stay hidden and survive, or to stand up and hope the system does not crush them. The formal complaint was filed that afternoon, exactly 1 week after the assault. Kendra delivered it personally to the Internal Affairs office on the 5th floor. The intake officer, a young man with nervous hands, accepted the documents without meeting her eyes. This will be reviewed by the assigned investigator, he said. You will receive notice of the hearing date. When? Standard timeline is 60 to 90 days. That is unacceptable. He looked up startled. The security footage has been preserved, Kendra said. The witnesses are identified. The pattern of complaints is documented. There is no reason for a 60-day delay. Ma'am, Judge Whitaker, that is just how. I know how it works. I also know that expedited review is available for cases involving clear evidence of misconduct. Florida Administrative Code 60L 36.005. I am requesting expedited review. The intake officer swallowed. I will note that in the file. You will do more than note. You will forward it to Investigator Assay with my request for a meeting within 72 hours. He typed something on his computer. His hands were shaking. Done, he said. Kendra turned and walked out. Behind her, she heard him pick up the phone. Investigator Assay, we have a situation. The situation was about to become significantly more complicated. Days later. Kendra was reviewing case files in her chambers when her judicial assistant knocked. Judge Whitaker, you have a visitor. Attorney Damon Voss. She set down her pen. Voss, the Hollisters' attorney, the man who had filed the provocative conduct motion, the man whose email had been conveniently forwarded to her inbox. Send him in. Voss entered with the confidence of a man who believed he was about to win. He was well-dressed, well-groomed, and carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most defendants' cars. "Judge Whitaker," he said, "thank you for seeing me. I did not invite you. You showed up. Fair point." He settled into the chair across from her desk. "Uninvited. I will be brief. My clients are prepared to make this go away. Your clients assaulted me. My clients had an encounter with a woman they did not recognize. An encounter that escalated. An encounter that both sides now regret." "I do not regret anything." Voss smiled. It was the smile of a man who had practiced it in mirrors. "Judge Whitaker, let me be direct. You filed an internal affairs complaint. You have requested preservation of security footage. You have retained counsel, Felicia Conwell, I believe, who has her own history with Mr. Harlan. You are building toward a public confrontation. I am pursuing accountability. You are pursuing embarrassment for yourself, for this courthouse, for the institution you have served for years." He leaned forward. "What do you actually want?" "I want the man who grabbed me to face consequences. I want the security supervisor who dismissed my complaint to face consequences. I want the system that enabled both of them to change. And you think a public hearing will accomplish that?" "I think silence accomplishes nothing." Voss nodded slowly. "What if I told you that my clients are prepared to make a significant donation to a civil rights organization of your choice? 6 figures, anonymous, no connection to this incident. What if I told you that Mr. Harlan has agreed to early retirement effective next month? What if I told you that the chief judge has already drafted a policy memo on implicit bias training for courthouse security?" Kendra felt the cold thing in her chest grow colder. "You have already talked to Brinkley. I have talked to everyone. Judge Whitaker. That is my job. And everyone agrees that this can be resolved quietly, cleanly, without spectacle, without accountability, with discreet accountability. Harlan retires. My clients donate. You receive a private apology. Everyone moves on." She stood, walked to the window. "Mr. Voss, do you know how many black women have filed complaints against Victor Harlan in the past few years?" Silence. "At least 7. Probably more. Women who were questioned, dismissed, humiliated, and then told their experiences did not matter. Women whose complaints were marked resolved, no action, and buried in personnel files that nobody reads." She turned to face him. "If I accept your offer, I am telling those women that their experiences still do not matter. I am telling them that money and retirement packages are the price of institutional racism. I am telling them that even a sitting judge cannot change anything. You are being idealistic." "I am being accurate." Voss stood. His smile had faded. "Then I suppose we will see each other at the hearing. I suppose we will." He walked to the door, paused. "One last thing, Judge Whitaker. Discovery works both ways. If this goes forward, my clients will be entitled to examine your record, your cases, your decisions. Any patterns of bias, any reversals on appeal, anything that might suggest that your judgment is compromised. Is that a threat?" "It is legal process." He opened the door. "Good luck." He left, and Kendra sat very still, thinking about what he had said. Discovery works both ways. They were going to look for something, some weakness, some vulnerability, some case she had decided wrong, some ruling that could be challenged, some pattern that could be spun into doubt. They were going to try to destroy her credibility. She picked up her phone, called Felicia. "We need to review my case history, all of it. Every ruling, every appeal, every complaint before they do. What happened? Voss just threatened to dig through my record." Silence. "Then I will start tonight." The first crack appeared days later. Felicia called, her voice tight. "Kendra, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "State versus Morrison." You denied a motion to suppress evidence in a drug case. The defendant was black. His attorney filed an appeal claiming racial bias in your ruling. The appeal was denied? Yes, but the attorney's brief is still on file and it includes a quote from your ruling that taken out of context sounds. What? Sounds like you said that the defendant's race was relevant to the probable cause determination. Kendra closed her eyes. I said that the defendant's description matched the witness's description, which included race as one of several identifying characteristics. That is standard Fourth Amendment analysis. I know what you said, but Voss does not care about context. He cares about headlines, and black judge cited race in criminal ruling is one hell of a headline. So, we get ahead of it. How? We release the full ruling, the full court text before he can cherry-pick. That is risky. It makes it look like you are defensive. I am not defensive. I am accurate. There is a difference. Another silence. There is something else. Felicia said, What? The Morrison appeal. The attorney who filed it. What about him? He is dead. Car accident? Months after the appeal was denied. Kendra felt something cold move through her, and his files were transferred to his firm. Voss's firm. The cold thing spread. Are you saying Voss had access to the Morrison file before he threatened to dig through my record? I am saying it is a hell of a coincidence. The second crack appeared days after that. An email arrived in Kendra's personal inbox. Not her courthouse account, her personal address, the one she used for family and old friends. Sender unknown. Subject, you should see this attachment. One PDF file. She opened it. It was a photograph of a document, a single page yellowed with age, a case file from years earlier. The header read Circuit Court of Miami-Dade County. Case number, Defendant Ashford Raymond L. Charge, possession with intent to distribute. Disposition guilty. Sentence 2 years. Raymond Hargrove, her father's brother, her uncle, who she had last seen at a family gathering when she was a teenager. Her uncle, who had disappeared into the prison system and never returned. Her uncle, whose case file was now sitting in her inbox, sent by someone who wanted her to know they knew. She stared at the photograph. Someone had done their research, deep research, the kind of research that required access to decades-old court records and the power to connect family trees. Someone wanted her to know that they could hurt her, that they could reveal a family member's criminal record, that they could spin a narrative. Black judge with convict uncle. How impartial can she really be? It was a warning shot, and it had come from inside the courthouse. Though Kendra did not sleep that night, she sat in her living room, lights off, staring at the photograph on her phone screen, at her uncle's name, at the charge, at the sentence that had erased him from her family's life. She thought about the morning she had learned he was gone. Her father's face closed, ashamed, refusing to speak of it. Her mother's quiet tears. The way the family had simply moved on, as if Raymond had never existed. She had been a teenager. She had not understood. Now she understood perfectly. The system that had taken her uncle was the same system she now served. The same system she was trying to hold accountable. The same system that was now threatening to use his memory against her. She picked up her phone, opened her contacts, found a name she had not called in years. Her father answered on the third ring. Kendra, it is after midnight. What is wrong? Dad, I need to ask you about Uncle Raymond. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Why? Because someone is using his case against me, and I need to know if there is anything else. Any other secrets? Any other things that could be found? More silence. Dad, please, he exhaled. A tired sound. The sound of a man who had carried something heavy for a very long time. Your uncle made mistakes, he said. We all did. But what happened to him? That was not just his mistakes. What do you mean? The officer who arrested him, the prosecutor who charged him, the judge who sentenced him. What about them? They are all dead now. Does not matter anymore? It matters to me. Another exhale? Your uncle was set up, Kendra. The drugs were not his. He was holding them for someone. A friend, he thought. Someone who turned out to be an informant. The whole thing was a sting operation that went wrong. Raymond took the fall because nobody believed him. Nobody wanted to believe him. And you never told me. What was I supposed to say? That the system your daughter wants to serve destroyed her uncle. That the robes you wear were worn by a man who sentenced an innocent person. Kendra's hand tightened on the phone. Who was the judge? Does it matter? Who was the judge, Dad? Another silence, the longest yet. Warren Kingsley, her father said. Your mentor. The world tilted. Kendra sat in the dark, phone pressed to her ear, and felt everything she had believed rearrange itself. Kingsley, her mentor, her champion, the man who had recommended her for appellate panels, the man who had written her performance reviews, the man who had urged her to let the Hollister assault disappear, the man who had sentenced her uncle, the man who had known all this time exactly who she was. Dad, she said, did he know? Does Kingsley know I am Raymond's niece? He knows. He has always known. How can you be sure? Because he called me, Kendra, the week you were appointed to the bench. He called me and said he wanted me to know he remembered Raymond, that he hoped the family could move forward, that he would be watching over your career. And you did not tell me. I thought I was protecting you. I thought if you knew you would never take the bench, and I wanted you to succeed where Raymond could not. Kendra closed her eyes. I need to go, she said. Kendra, I need to go. Dad, I will call you tomorrow. She hung up and she sat in the dark alone with the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on her chest. She understood now Kingsley's mentorship, his glowing reviews, his protection, guilt. He had sentenced an innocent man, her uncle, and spent the next decades making amends to a niece who did not know she was owed anything. And now, when she threatened to hold the system accountable, he wanted her to disappear, not to protect the institution, to protect himself. Because if her case went forward, if discovery happened, if investigators started digging through courthouse history, they might find more than Harlan's pattern of discrimination. They might find Kingsley's past. Days later, Kendra arrived at the courthouse early. She parked blocks away, as she had every day since the attack. She walked through the public entrance, nodded to the security guard, and took the elevator to the 5th floor. Internal Affairs Investigator Renato Ose's office. She knocked. Come in. Renata was sitting behind her desk, surrounded by files. She looked up, read something in Kendra's face. What happened? Kendra closed the door behind her. I need to expand the scope of the complaint. Expand it how? I believe Chief Judge Warren Kingsley has been influencing the handling of discrimination complaints within the courthouse for personal reasons. I believe he has used his position to suppress investigations and protect individuals whose misconduct might expose his own history. Renata's eyes widened. That is a serious allegation? Asterisk, it is an accurate one. Do you have evidence? Kendra sat down. I have decades of questions that were never asked. I have a pattern of complaints against Harlan that were systematically dismissed. I have a case from years earlier that connects Kingsley to my family, and I have the sense that someone inside this courthouse has been waiting a very long time for someone to finally start asking. Renata was very still. The anonymous source, she said. The person sending the envelopes. You think they know about Kingsley? I think they know everything. I think they have been building this case for years. And I think they chose me because I am the only one who has both the standing and the motivation to see it through. Motivation. Kingsley sentenced my uncle for a crime he did not commit. He has been managing my career ever since, not as a mentor, but as a guardian of his own secrets. When I file this complaint, I am not just challenging Harlan. I am challenging the system that protected both of them. Renata leaned back in her chair. You understand what this means. If you go forward with this, you are not just filing a complaint. You are starting a war. I know. A war you might not win. I know that too. Renata studied her for a long moment. What do you need from me? I need you to open a parallel investigation into Kingsley's handling of the Harlan complaints. I need you to subpoena his personnel records, his judicial conduct history, and any communications related to discrimination investigations over the past decade. And I need you to do it before he realizes what is happening. That is a tall order. That is justice. Another long pause. Then Renata nodded. I will make some calls. The third anonymous envelope arrived that afternoon. It was waiting in Kendra's chambers when she returned from her meeting with Assay. Same plain manila, same lack of return address. Inside a single photograph. Two men shaking hands. Young, smiling, standing in front of a sign that read Miami-Dade County Democratic Party Annual Gala. One of the men was Warren Kingsley, decades younger, full head of dark hair, already wearing the expression of a man destined for the bench. The other man was Victor Harlan, also younger, also smiling, also destined for something, though his path had led to a security badge instead of robes. Beneath the photograph, handwritten, they have known each other since the beginning. The question is, who else knows? Kendra stared at the photograph. Decades earlier, Kingsley and Harlan, already connected, already moving through the same circles, already part of the same machinery. The same machinery that had crushed her uncle, the same machinery that had dismissed complaints against Harlan, the same machinery that was now trying to crush her. She turned the photograph over. On the back, another handwritten note, different handwriting, older ink. I tried to tell them. Nobody listened. Now it is your turn. And beneath that, a date. The same date as the first complaint against Harlan. The same complaint that had been dismissed as insufficient evidence. Someone had been trying to expose this for years. Someone who had given up when nobody listened. Someone who was now handing the torch to Kendra. She looked at the handwriting, studied it. It was familiar. She had seen it before on a case file, on a memo, on a document that had passed through her chambers years ago. She went to her filing cabinet, pulled out an old folder, compared the handwriting. Match. The handwriting belonged to court reporter Yvette Finch. Kendra found Yvette in the break room on the third floor. The court reporter was alone, stirring a cup of tea, staring out the window at the Miami skyline. Miss Finch. Yvette turned. Her face was carefully neutral. Judge Whitaker. We need to talk. A pause then. Not here. They walked to the stairwell. Yvette checked both directions before speaking. You found the photograph. I found all of them. The complaints, the email, the photograph of Kingsley and Harlan. Kendra kept her voice low. You have been sending them. Not all of them. Just the photograph. The rest came from someone else. Who? I do not know. I received an envelope last year right after I filed my complaint against Harlan. Instructions on how to pass information without leaving a trail. I thought it was a trap at first, but then the documents started arriving. Documents I could not have accessed myself. Documents that proved what I had suspected for years. That Harlan was not acting alone. That Harlan was protected by someone powerful. Someone who had been protecting him since before I started working here. Kingsley. Yvette nodded. I saw them together. Judge Whitaker. Years ago at a function. The way Kingsley spoke to Harlan, not like a supervisor speaking to a subordinate, like an equal, like an old friend, like someone who owed him for what? I do not know. But I know it started decades ago, before I was hired, before you took the bench. Whatever they are hiding, it goes back decades. Kendra thought about her uncle, about the conviction, about Kingsley's phone call to her father. Miss Finch, do you know who else is involved? Who else has been sending documents? Yvette hesitated. I have a guess. Tell me. The email you received, the one from Voss that was accidentally forwarded, it came from inside his firm, from someone with access to privileged communications, a whistleblower, a plant, someone who has been embedded at the firm for years, waiting for the right case. Yvette's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Judge Whitaker, I do not think you realize how big this is. I do not think you realize how many people have been waiting for someone like you to finally ask the right questions. Then why did not anyone come forward sooner? Because we were afraid. Because we did not have power. Because the people who tried got transferred, demoted, or worse. Yvette's eyes were bright. But you are different. You are a judge. You have standing. You have protection. And you have something none of us had. What is that? Personal stakes. They destroyed your uncle. Now you get to destroy them. Kendra returned to her chambers. She closed the door. She sat at her desk. On the surface in front of her, the photograph of Kingsley and Harlan, the anonymous notes, the public records responses, the case file from years earlier. Decades of secrets, decades of silence, decades of a system protecting itself, and somewhere in that system, hidden among the clerks and reporters and administrative staff, a network of people who had been waiting for this moment. She picked up her phone, dialed Felicia. The scope of this case just changed. It is not just Harlan anymore. It is not just the assault. It is the entire structure that enabled him. Starting with Chief Judge Kingsley going back decades. Kendra, that is, I know what it is. I also know I cannot do it alone. What do you need? I need to find out who sent the anonymous envelopes. I need to identify the whistleblower inside Voss's firm. And I need to know who else has been waiting for someone to finally start this fight. A long pause. That could take months. Years. I have time. Do you? Kingsley knows you are coming for him now. He is going to fight back. He is going to use everything he has. Kendra looked at the photograph at Kingsley's young face, at the smile of a man who had built a career on other people's silence. Let him fight, she said. I have been preparing for this my whole life. And if I lose, then at least I tried. At least I did not let them bury another complaint. At least I did not let my uncle's memory disappear like everyone wanted. Silence. I am with you, Felicia said. Whatever it takes. Thank you. Kendra hung up and she sat in the growing dark, surrounded by documents and secrets, waiting for the next move. Outside her window, the Miami skyline glittered. Somewhere in that city, Grant Hollister was consulting with his attorney. Somewhere, Victor Harlan was reviewing his retirement options. Somewhere, Warren Kingsley was making phone calls, pulling strings, preparing to protect decades-old secrets. And somewhere, hidden in the courthouse's endless corridors, the anonymous source was waiting to see what Kendra would do next, waiting to see if she was brave enough to follow the trail to its end. The first part of this story ends here. But the question that would drive everything that followed remained. If Kingsley sentenced her uncle, if Harlan was there from the beginning, if they had been protecting each other for decades, who else knew? And what else were they hiding? The investigation moved like water through cracks and stone, slowly, persistently, finding every weakness in the walls that had been built to contain it. Weeks after the assault, Kendra sat in her chambers, reviewing the formal discovery packet that Felicia had assembled. The table before her was covered in documents, photographs, and transcripts. Each piece of evidence was tagged and cross-referenced. Each piece told part of a story that was larger than she had imagined. The body camera footage had arrived first. Felicia had secured it through a court order, Judge Carolyn Reeves presiding, since Kendra had recused herself from all matters related to her own complaint. The footage was grainy, the audio tinny, but the content was damning. The recording showed exactly what Kendra remembered: Harlan approaching her, separating her from the Hollisters, asking for her statement, then canceling the dispatch before she could give one. But there was something else on the footage, something Kendra had not noticed in the moment. At the edge of the frame, a figure appeared, a man in a dark suit standing near the elevator watching. He did not approach, did not intervene, simply observed. And then he made a phone call. The moment Harlan decided to cancel the dispatch was 1 minute later. Someone had told Harlan to stand down, someone who had been watching from the shadows. The figure's face was not visible in the footage. The angle was wrong, the resolution too poor, but his silhouette was distinctive. Tall, silver-haired, carrying himself with the authority of a man who expected to be obeyed. Kendra knew that silhouette. She had seen it every day for her time on the bench. The dispatch logs confirmed the timeline. Kendra's 911 call had been logged. Leela Hollister's call came shortly after. Kendra's call came first, but the response went to Leela. The dispatcher's notes read, "Unit dispatched per caller. Caller flagged as duplicate incident. No additional response required." Someone had marked her call as a duplicate. Someone had decided that the black woman's account was redundant, that the white woman's version was the only one that mattered. Felicia traced the flag to a supervisor override. The supervisor's employee ID was redacted in the official record, but the timing was clear. The same moment Leela's call connected, the same moment the figure in the dark suit made his phone call. "It is coordinated," Felicia said during their next meeting. "The timing is too precise to be coincidence. Someone was watching you that morning, someone who knew you would be in that garage. The construction vehicles," Kendra said, "they blocked the judge's lot, forced me to park in the public structure. Hollister and Sons Commercial Contracting, Grant's company." Felicia nodded slowly. What if it was not an accident? What if the construction was deliberately scheduled to force judges into the public garage? "That is paranoid, is it?" Felicia pulled out a document. "I checked the construction permits. The work was scheduled to start later. Someone moved it up. The authorization came from the chief judge's office." Kendra felt the cold thing in her chest spread through her entire body. Kingsley scheduled the construction. Kingsley created the conditions. Whether he knew what would happen, Felicia shrugged. That is what discovery is for. The public records responses continued to arrive. Several complaints against Victor Harlan over the past years. Black women who had reported discriminatory treatment. Complaints marked resolved. No action required. But there was a pattern in the complaints that Kendra had not noticed before. Each woman had been in the courthouse for a specific purpose, not random visitors, not confused tourists. Each one had been there for a case that was later decided against them or their family members. The woman from the first complaint was the sister of a defendant in a drug possession case. Her brother had been convicted. The presiding judge, Warren Kingsley, the woman who was Patricia Conwo's complaint, had been at the courthouse representing a client in an employment discrimination case. The case was dismissed on summary judgment. The presiding judge, Warren Kingsley, the woman who had been blocked from entering a courtroom, was there for her son's sentencing hearing. Aggravated assault. The presiding judge, Warren Kingsley, complaints, cases, decisions that had gone against black defendants or plaintiffs, and one judge whose name appeared on every single file. He has been using Harlan as a filter, Kendra said, intimidating witnesses, harassing family members. creating hostile conditions that discourage people from attending hearings or supporting defendants. Renata Say sat across from her in the Internal Affairs conference room. The investigator's face was carefully neutral, but her eyes betrayed something that might have been vindication. "We suspected as much," Renata said, "but we could never prove the connection. The complaints were always isolated incidents, different dates, different circumstances, different complainants. Nobody saw the pattern because nobody was looking, because the pattern was designed to be invisible." Renata opened a folder. "I have been authorized to expand the investigation. Chief Judge Kingsley is now a person of interest." "On what grounds?" "Obstruction of administrative proceedings. Potential conspiracy to deprive citizens of civil rights under color of law." And she hesitated. "And your uncle's case, State versus Raymond Hargrove." Kendra's breath caught. "We pulled the file," Renata continued. "The original case file, not the summary. There are irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "The arresting officer's report was amended several times before trial. Each amendment added details that strengthened the prosecution's case, details that were not in the original arrest narrative." "That happens." "It does. But the amendments were all authorized by the same supervisor, Deputy Victor Harlan, Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office, years earlier, before he transferred to courthouse security." Kendra looked at the document at Harlan's signature at the date, weeks before her uncle's trial. "He was a deputy sheriff for years. He transferred to courthouse security in the same year Kingsley was appointed chief judge. They had been working together for over decades at minimum." Renata closed the folder. "Judge Whitaker, I have to be honest with you. This investigation is going to take time, years potentially, and there is no guarantee of outcome. Kingsley has powerful allies. Harlan has union protection. The evidence we have is circumstantial, compelling, but circumstantial." "What are you telling me?" "I am telling you that if you want quick resolution, you will not find it here. The system protects itself. Even when we expose the rot, the system finds ways to survive." Kendra thought about her uncle, about the years he had lost, about the family gatherings where his name was never spoken. "I am not looking for quick resolution," she said. "I am looking for the truth. Then we will find it, however long it takes. The system protects itself, but sometimes one person can crack the foundation." Keep watching. Weeks after the assault, the criminal charges were filed. State of Florida versus Grant Hollister and Lilo Hollister. Case number. Judge Carolyn Reeves presiding. The charging document listed 3 counts. Count 1, battery, maximum penalty, imprisonment, fine. Count 2, battery on a judicial officer, enhanced felony, maximum penalty, imprisonment, fine. Count 3, filing false police report, misdemeanor, maximum penalty, imprisonment, fine. The enhancement, count 2, was the key. Under Florida law, assaulting a judicial officer carried significantly harsher penalties than simple battery. The statute was designed to protect the integrity of the justice system, to ensure that judges could perform their duties without fear of retaliation. Grant Hollister had not known he was assaulting a judge. That ignorance would not protect him. The arraignment was scheduled. Kendra was not present. She could not be. She was a witness in the case, not a participant. But she watched the proceedings through the courthouse closed-circuit system, standing in an empty conference room on the 4th floor. Grant and Leela stood at the defense table, their attorney Damon Voss between them. They looked diminished somehow, smaller. The courtroom's fluorescent lights washed the color from their faces. "How do the defendants plead?" Judge Reeves asked. Voss spoke for them. "Not guilty, Your Honor. We request reasonable bail and object to the enhanced charges under count 2. The defendants had no knowledge that the alleged victim was a judicial officer. Ignorance is not a defense to the enhancement counselor. The statute is clear. We intend to challenge the constitutionality of the statute as applied. Your Honor, you may file your motion. Bail is set. Defendants will surrender their passports and refrain from any contact with the victim or witnesses in this case. The gavel fell and Kendra watched the Hollisters being led away to process their release. Their faces pale, their confidence shattered. It was not satisfaction she felt. It was something harder to name. The discovery phase lasted months. Months of depositions, document requests, and legal maneuvering. Months of Voss filing motion after motion to dismiss, to suppress, to compel, to delay. Months of Felicia responding, countering, pushing back. During those months, Kendra continued to sit on the bench, continued to hear cases, continued to perform the duties she had sworn to uphold. But something had changed. The courthouse felt different now. The familiar corridors seemed to hold shadows she had never noticed. The colleagues who nodded to her in hallways, did they know? Had they always known? Were they part of the system that had protected Kingsley and Harlan? Or were they, like her, simply blind to what had been happening beneath the surface? She found herself watching people more carefully, noticing details. The security guard, who always seemed to be near her courtroom, the clerk who handled her files with unusual attention, the bailiff who had nodded to her that day in the hallway, the deep knowing nod that had seemed significant even then. One afternoon, weeks into the discovery phase, that bailiff approached her. His name was Theodore Marsh, decades on the job. "Judge Whitaker," he said, his voice low. "May I speak with you privately?" They stepped into an empty jury room. Theodore checked the door twice before speaking. "I worked with Harlan when he first transferred in. I was there. What did you see?" "I saw him take orders not from his supervisors, from someone else. Phone calls he would take in private. Instructions he would follow without question." Theodore's hands were clasped in front of him, the knuckles white. "I never knew who was on the other end. Never asked, but I knew it was not right. Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you are the first person who has asked the right questions." He met her eyes. "And because I am tired of pretending I do not see what I see. Would you testify?" A long pause. "If it comes to that," he said finally, "yes, I would testify." Among them, the witnesses began to emerge. One by one, like figures stepping out of fog, they came forward. The women who had filed complaints against Harlan, the clerks who had noticed irregularities, the attorneys who had suspected bias but had no way to prove it. Each one had a story. Each story added a thread to the tapestry Kendra was weaving. Felicia Conwo testified at her own deposition about her complaint, how Harlan had demanded additional forms of identification when she entered the building, how he had made her open her briefcase and remove every item, how he had commented that she did not look like a lawyer. "What did you do?" the deposing attorney asked. "I filed a complaint. It was marked inconclusive. I was told there was no evidence of discriminatory intent. Did you pursue the matter further?" "No. I had clients to represent, cases to file. I told myself it was an isolated incident." Her voice hardened. "I was wrong. The woman from the first complaint was named Denise Williams. Her brother had been convicted of drug possession with intent to distribute, sentenced by Judge Warren Kingsley. She testified that Harlan had stopped her in the lobby on the day of her brother's sentencing hearing, had demanded to see her ID, had told her she was making a scene when she asked why, had delayed her long enough that she missed the first minutes of her brother's hearing. "Did you file a complaint?" "I tried. The intake officer told me it would take weeks to process, that by the time anything happened, my brother's case would be over." Denise's eyes were dry, but her voice shook. "I did not know what else to do, so I let it go. And your brother, He has been in prison for years. He has a daughter who has never seen him outside of visiting hours, the mother from the other complaint. The one who had been blocked from entering her son's courtroom was named Barbara Chen. Her son had been convicted of aggravated assault, sentenced by Judge Warren Kingsley. She testified that Harlan had physically stepped in front of her when she tried to enter the courtroom, had told her the gallery was full when she could see empty seats through the window, had threatened to have her arrested for trespassing if she did not leave. Did anyone intervene? A bailiff came out eventually, Theodore Marsh. He told Harlan to let me through. Barbara's face tightened. But by then, my son had already been sentenced. I did not get to see him before they took him away. Did you file a complaint? I filed and I got a letter weeks later saying my complaint had been resolved. No explanation. No apology. Nothing. Complaints. Women. Stories of being made to feel like they did not belong in their own courthouse. And one security supervisor whose actions had been protected over and over by a system designed to look the other way. The parallel investigation into Kingsley more slowly. Renata Assay had been careful. Too careful, Kendra sometimes thought. Every step was documented, every procedure followed, every potential objection anticipated and addressed. We only get one shot at this, Renata explained during one of their meetings. If we move too fast, if we cut corners, his attorneys will find a way to dismiss everything. We have to build an airtight case, and if he retires before we are ready, then we pursue him as a private citizen. The statute of limitations on civil rights violations is generous. That is not justice. That is letting him escape. That is reality. Renata's voice was not unkind. Judge Whitaker, I understand your frustration, but the same rules that protect Kingsley also protect the victims we are trying to help. Due process is not just for defendants. It is for everyone. Kendra thought about her uncle, about the process that had failed him decades ago. Sometimes due process is just another word for delay. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it is the only thing standing between accusation and conviction. Renata paused. Would you want to be convicted without it? Kendra did not answer, but she understood. Justice moves slowly, but it moves. Do not give up. Months after the assault, the plea negotiations began. Voss approached the prosecutor with an offer. The Hollisters would plead guilty to misdemeanor battery. They would accept community service, probation, and a fine. In exchange, the felony enhancement under Count 2 would be dropped. The evidence supports enhanced charges, the prosecutor told Kendra during a victim consultation meeting. We can prove battery on a judicial officer. We can prove they filed a false report. But trials are uncertain. Juries are unpredictable. And Voss is already laying groundwork for a defense based on lack of knowledge, arguing that the enhancement requires the defendant to know the victim's status. Does it? The statute is ambiguous. No appellate court has ruled on the issue. If we go to trial and lose on Count 2, the Hollisters walk away with a misdemeanor conviction, maybe probation, maybe less, and if we take the plea, they are convicted felons. The battery charge stays on their record. They do community service. They serve probation, and if they violate, the prosecutor met her eyes. If they violate, we can reinstate the enhanced charges. The clock starts over. Kendra considered it. What do you recommend? I recommend we make them sweat a little longer. File some additional motions. Let them see what discovery looks like. Then, if they still want to deal, we negotiate from strength. And the message that sends, the message is that assaulting anyone in this courthouse, judge, clerk, janitor, has consequences. Maybe not the consequences we want, but consequences nonetheless. The sweat worked. Weeks later, Voss returned with a revised offer. The Hollisters would plead no contest to battery on a judicial officer, the felony charge. They would accept hours of community service, years of probation, and a fine. The false report charge would be dropped. It was not everything, but it was something. Kendra sat in the consultation room reading the proposed plea agreement. Felicia sat beside her, silent. "What do you think?" the prosecutor asked. "I think it is insufficient. It is a felony conviction. They will have to disclose it on every job application, every background check for the rest of their lives. They assaulted me. They lied about it. They tried to destroy my reputation." Kendra's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "A felony conviction and community service does not erase that." "No, it does not." The prosecutor leaned forward. "But it is a foundation. The Hollisters are convicted. Harlan is under investigation. Kingsley is a person of interest. The case you are building, the larger case, depends on this conviction. Without it, everything else falls apart." Felicia spoke for the first time. "He is right, Kendra. This is not the end. It is the beginning." Kendra looked at the plea agreement, at the sterile legal language that reduced her experience to clauses and conditions. "I want them to apologize," she said. "In court, on the record, I want them to admit what they did." The prosecutor nodded. "I will make it part of the deal." The plea hearing was held. Courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Camera crews waited outside. The story had leaked somehow. Black judge assaulted in courthouse garage. Attackers plead guilty. And the media had descended? Kendra sat in the first row of the gallery, not at the prosecution table. Ugh, on the bench. Just another citizen watching justice unfold. Judge Reeves called the court to order. "The court has reviewed the proposed plea agreement in the matter of State of Florida versus Grant Hollister and Lila Hollister. Before accepting the plea, the court will hear from the defendants. Mr. Hollister, do you understand the charges against you?" Grant stood. He was thinner than Kendra remembered. The months of legal proceedings had worn on him. "Yes, Your Honor. And do you understand that by pleading no contest, you are waiving your right to a trial by jury?" "Yes, Your Honor. The plea agreement requires you to make a statement acknowledging your conduct. Are you prepared to do so?" Grant's attorney whispered something. Grant nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Reeves gestured. "Proceed." Grant turned toward the gallery. His eyes found Kendra. "On the morning in question, I encountered a woman in the courthouse parking garage. I assumed based on her appearance that she did not belong there. I confronted her. When she did not respond the way I expected, I became aggressive. I grabbed her arm. I pushed her against a wall." His voice faltered. "I did not know she was a judge. But that is not the point. The point is that I treated her like she was less than human because of how she looked, because of assumptions I made. Assumptions that were wrong." He paused, swallowed. "I am sorry for what I did, for what I assumed, for the harm I caused." He sat down. Leela stood next. Her statement was shorter, more rehearsed. She admitted to calling 911 with a false report. She apologized for describing Kendra as suspicious and aggressive when she was neither. "I let my prejudice speak for me," Leela said. "I am ashamed of that." Judge Reeves accepted the plea. "Mr. and Mrs. Hollister, you have pleaded no contest to battery on a judicial officer, a felony under Florida law. The court sentences you each 2 hours of community service to be completed within months. You are placed on probation for a period of years. You will pay a fine to be deposited in the court's Victim Assistance Fund. You will have no contact with Judge Kendra Whitaker or any witnesses in this case." The gavel fell. This court stands adjourned. After the hearing, Kendra stood in the courthouse lobby, surrounded by people who wanted to shake her hand, congratulate her, tell her how brave she was. She felt none of it. She felt only the weight of what remained undone. The Hollisters were convicted, but Harlan was still employed. Suspended? Yes, but still drawing a paycheck while his union grievance wound through the system. Kingsley was still chief judge, a person of interest in an investigation that might take years to conclude. The systemic failures that had enabled the assault remained largely intact. Felicia found her near the elevators. "You should be proud," Felicia said. "This is a victory. It is a partial victory. All victories are partial. That is how justice works. One step at a time." Kendra watched the reporters filing out, already composing their headlines, already moving on to the next story. "The investigation into Kingsley," she said. "How long?" "Renata thinks months minimum, maybe longer, and if he retires before it concludes, then we pursue him as a civilian. The process continues. But the leverage is gone. If he is not chief judge, the institutional pressure disappears." Felicia was quiet for a moment. "There is something else," she said finally. "Something Renata found." "What?" "Your uncle's case file, the original one. There are documents missing." "What kind of documents?" "Witness statements. Witnesses who were interviewed by police, but whose testimony never appeared at trial. Their statements were removed from the file sometime between the preliminary hearing and the trial date. Who removed them? Unknown, but the removal was authorized by the supervising deputy on the case." "Harlan," Felicia nodded. "And the witnesses, 2 of them are dead. Natural causes both. The third is alive. Her name is Gloria Patterson. She is living in a nursing home, and she is willing to talk." Gloria Patterson had been a housekeeper years earlier. She had worked for a family whose son had been arrested for drug possession the same week as Raymond Hargrove. "I saw what happened," Gloria said. Her voice was thin but clear. "I was there when the police came. I saw them plant the drugs." Kendra sat beside her hospital bed, a recorder on the table between them. Felicia stood by the window taking notes. "What exactly did you see?" "The officers came to the house, 3 of them. They said they had a tip about drugs, but I knew that family for years. Good people, church people. There were no drugs in that house." "What happened next?" "They searched the garage, found nothing. Then one of them, young fellow, dark hair, mean eyes, he went back to the car, came back with a bag, a plastic bag with something white inside. And then he went into the garage by himself. Came out a minute later and called the others over. Said he found something." Gloria's hand trembled on the bed sheet. "That bag was not there before. I know what I saw." "Did you tell anyone?" "I tried. I talked to a detective, told him what I saw. He wrote it all down, said they would look into it and nothing. Nobody ever called me back. Nobody asked me to testify. When I tried to contact the detective again, he said my statement had been lost. Said I must have been mistaken about what I saw." "Do you remember the detective's name?" Gloria's eyes focused on something far away. "Harlan," she said. "His name was Victor Harlan." The pieces were coming together. Harlan had been involved in the original arrest. Harlan had supervised the evidence. Harlan had removed witness statements that might have exonerated Raymond Hargrove. And decades later, Harlan was still protecting the same system, still harassing black visitors, still dismissing complaints, still following orders from someone whose identity remained hidden in shadow. But the shadow was shrinking. The photograph from decades earlier, Kingsley and Harlan shaking hands at a political fundraiser. 2 young men at the beginning of their careers, already connected, already building the network that would protect them for decades. The construction schedule moved up, forcing judges into the public garage. Authorization from the chief judge's office. The figure on the body camera footage, tall, silver-haired, making a phone call before Harlan canceled the dispatch. It all pointed to Kingsley, but pointing was not proving. "We need more," Renata said during their next meeting. Gloria Patterson's testimony is compelling, but it is decades old. Defense attorneys will tear it apart. We need documentation. We need records. The records were destroyed. Some of them, but not all, were not a slit of folder across the table. I found something in the archives. A memo from the year after your uncle's conviction. Internal review of the Hargrove case. Author unknown. The signature page is missing, but the content is interesting. Kendra opened the folder. The memo was pages long, densely typed, full of legal jargon, but certain passages were highlighted. Procedural irregularities in the handling of evidence. Witness statements removed without proper authorization. Recommendation for further review. And on the final page, this review concludes that significant questions remain regarding the integrity of the prosecution's case against Raymond Hargrove. However, given the defendant's conviction and the expiration of direct appeal deadlines, no further action is recommended at this time. The matter is closed. Signed, Administrative Review Committee. No names, no accountability, just a quiet acknowledgement that something had gone wrong and a decision to do nothing about it. They knew, Kendra said. They knew that my uncle's conviction was questionable, and they buried it. They buried a lot of things, Renata said. But buried things have a way of coming back up. What do you need from me? I need you to be patient. The Kingsley investigation is ongoing. We are building a case for the Judicial Qualifications Commission. Pattern of misconduct, abuse of authority, possible conspiracy. But it takes time. How much time? I do not know. Months, maybe years. Renata's expression softened. Judge Whitaker, I understand this is personal for you, your uncle, your family, everything that was taken from them. But if we rush this, if we cut corners, Kingsley walks. He retires with his pension, his reputation, his secrets intact. Is that what you want? I want justice. Then let us do our job. Let the process work. The process worked slowly, painfully, but it worked. Months after the assault, the Internal Affairs investigation into Victor Harlan concluded. The findings were damning. A pattern of discriminatory behavior spanning more than a decade. Multiple complaints dismissed without proper investigation. Evidence of coordination with courthouse officials to minimize accountability. The recommendation. Termination. Harlan's union filed an immediate grievance. The matter was referred to arbitration. The timeline stretched into uncertainty, but the findings were public now. The pattern was documented, and for the first time in years, Victor Harlan was not protected by the shield of institutional silence. Months after the assault, Chief Judge Warren Kingsley announced his retirement. The press release cited personal reasons and a desire to spend more time with family. It made no mention of the ongoing investigation, the scrutiny that had intensified in recent months, the questions that had no good answers. Kingsley's last act as Chief Judge was to issue a public statement acknowledging the unfortunate incident involving Judge Kendra Whitaker and announcing new implicit bias training for all courthouse security personnel. The 11th Judicial Circuit, the statement read, is committed to ensuring that every person who enters our facilities is treated with dignity and respect. We condemn any conduct that falls short of that standard, and we are implementing enhanced protocols to prevent future incidents. The training was scheduled to begin pending budget approval. For words that could mean anything. For words that meant in practice nothing. Retirement is not accountability. Remember that months after the assault, the Department of Justice opened a preliminary inquiry into the Miami-Dade Courthouse Security Division. The letter arrived. Kendra read it in her chambers alone. This office is examining whether the policies and practices of the Miami-Dade Courthouse Security Division constitute a pattern or practice of discriminatory enforcement. Your complaint, along with supporting documentation, has been included in the materials under review. It was not an investigation, not yet, but it was a beginning. Months after the assault, the arbitration ruling came down. Victor Harlan was suspended without pay for days. He would be required to complete hours of sensitivity training before returning to duty. His personnel file would include a formal reprimand. He was not terminated. The union had argued successfully that the evidence, while troubling, did not meet the standard for termination under the collective bargaining agreement. Harlan had followed procedures, flawed procedures perhaps, but procedures nonetheless. The complaints against him were isolated incidents that did not demonstrate a pattern of intentional discrimination. Kendra read the ruling and felt something break inside her. Not break like shattering, break like a bone that heals wrong, break like something that would never be quite right again. Days of harassment, intimidation, and discrimination, and the punishment was days. She found Yvette Finch in the break room that evening. The court reporter was packing a box. They transferred me, Yvette said before Kendra could ask. Night court, effective immediately, that is retaliation. That is the system. Yvette's voice was flat. I knew the risk when I came forward. I knew what they would do. I can file a complaint and what? Add another piece of paper to another pile. Hope that someone somewhere actually does something. Yvette shook her head. I do not regret helping you, Judge Whitaker. What you are doing matters, but I am tired. I have been fighting this system for years, and it is still standing. Maybe it always will be. She picked up her box. Good luck, she said. You are going to need it. She walked away, and Kendra stood alone in the empty break room, surrounded by the hum of vending machines and the silence of a building that had absorbed decades of secrets. Months after the assault, Kendra returned to her chambers to find an envelope on her desk. It was from the Judicial Qualifications Commission. She had been expecting it for weeks. The formal notification of the investigation status, the next steps in the process, the timeline for Kingsley's accountability. She opened it. The letter was brief. After thorough review of the material submitted, the Judicial Qualifications Commission has determined that insufficient evidence exists to proceed with formal charges against former Chief Judge Warren Kingsley. While the Commission acknowledges the concerns raised by multiple complainants, the available documentation does not meet the evidentiary standard required for disciplinary action. This matter is now closed. Closed. Decades of cover-ups, decades of protection, and the matter was closed. Kendra set the letter down. She thought about her uncle, still serving time for a crime he might not have committed. She thought about Gloria Patterson, whose testimony had been ignored for decades. She thought about the women whose complaints had been dismissed, the witnesses who had come forward only to be transferred or silenced, the system that had absorbed every blow and emerged unchanged. She thought about Kingsley somewhere in Florida enjoying his retirement, his pension, his reputation, and she felt something new. Not despair, not defeat, something colder, something harder, determination. The same day she received the Commission's letter, Kendra filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. The defendant, Warren Kingsley, individually and in his former capacity as Chief Judge of the 11th Judicial Circuit. The claim, conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights under color of law in violation of section. The evidence, everything she had gathered over the past months, the complaints, the witness statements, the documents, the patterns, the connections. The Commission might have closed its investigation, but Kendra was just beginning hers. Months after the assault, Grant Hollister violated his probation. The notice came from his probation officer, a routine report flagged for attention because of the high-profile nature of the case. Hollister had missed his mandatory check-in. His community service hours were incomplete. He had failed to pay the installment of his fine. Under the terms of his plea agreement, the felony charges could be reinstated. The clock had started over. Kendra read the notice in her chambers. Outside her window, the Miami skyline glittered in the afternoon sun. Construction cranes dotted the horizon, building new towers on foundations she could not see. Her phone buzzed. A text from the prosecutor. Heard about Hollister. Hearing scheduled for next month. Thought you should know. She typed a response. Thank you. Keep me informed. She set the phone down and she allowed herself for the first time in months something that felt almost like hope. Months after the assault, Kendra parked in the public garage, level, space to 47, the same space where it had all begun. It was early, and the garage was nearly empty. Her footsteps echoed off the concrete as she walked toward the elevator. A security guard approached. New uniform, new face, name tag that reads, "Morning, Judge Whitaker," he said. "Morning." He did not ask for ID, did not block her path, did not question why she was there. Small thing, everything and nothing. She pressed the elevator button, waited, the doors opened, she stepped inside, and as she rose through the building, past the lobby, past the courtrooms, past the offices where people were just beginning to arrive, she thought about everything that had happened, everything that had changed, everything that remained the same. Grant Hollister was facing new charges. Victor Harlan was suspended, counting down the days until his return. Warren Kingsley was retired, protected by a system that had failed to hold him accountable. The Department of Justice inquiry was ongoing, preliminary, tentative, uncertain. The civil lawsuit was filed, years away from resolution, assuming it survived the inevitable motions to dismiss. The training program was implemented, pending budget approval, effectiveness unknown, and somewhere in the building, hidden in the endless corridors and quiet offices, the people who had sent the anonymous envelopes were still watching, still waiting, still hoping that someone would finally crack the foundation. Kendra reached her floor. The doors opened. She stepped out into the hallway, walked to her chambers, opened the door. On her desk, a new envelope waited. Plain manila, no return address. She opened it. Inside a single sheet of paper, a photograph. The photograph showed a filing cabinet drawer pulled open. Inside the drawer, dozens of folders, each one labeled with a name and a date. The visible labels read Williams D., Okonwo P., Shen B., Whitaker K., and beneath the photograph handwritten, "There are more, many more." The drawer is just the beginning, and below that, a new instruction. Ask about the basement, room B7. What Kingsley left behind. Kendra stared at the photograph. A filing cabinet, folders, names, dates, a record of every complaint, every victim, every person the system had silenced, hidden somewhere in the courthouse basement, left behind by a man who thought his secrets would stay buried. She picked up her phone, called Renata. "There is something in the basement," she said. "Room B7. I think you need to see it." A pause on the line. "How do you know?" "Someone told me. Someone who has been helping me from the beginning. The anonymous source." "Yes." Another pause. "Longer this time. I will meet you there in minutes." Room B7 was at the end of a long corridor past the mechanical rooms and the storage areas in a part of the basement that most courthouse employees had never seen. The door was locked. Renata had brought a maintenance worker with a master key. The room was small and filled with filing cabinets, dozens of them, gray metal, institutional, unmarked. Kendra opened the nearest drawer. Folders, hundreds of folders, each one containing a complaint, a witness statement, a piece of evidence that had been removed from the official record. Decades of secrets, decades of silence, all of it here in this room, waiting to be found. This is, Renata's voice trailed off. This is everything, Kendra said. Everything Kingsley wanted to hide. Everything he thought would never be found. She pulled a folder at random, opened it. The name on the label, Hargrove Raymond L., her uncle's file. Inside, the witness statements that had been removed before trial, Gloria Patterson's testimony to others, all of them describing what they had seen, all of them ignored. And beneath the statements, a handwritten note per W.K. removed from official file, not relevant to prosecution. W.K. Warren Kingsley, the truth does not disappear. It waits sometimes for decades. The discovery of Room B7 changed everything. Within a week, the Judicial Qualifications Commission reopened its investigation. Within a month, the Department of Justice upgraded its preliminary inquiry to a formal pattern or practice investigation. Within months, federal agents had cataloged more than complaints that had been improperly handled, dismissed, or buried over a decade period. Warren Kingsley was indicted on counts of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. His trial would not begin for another months, but the indictment was enough. The system that had protected him for decades had finally irrevocably cracked. The end came quietly, not with a dramatic courtroom confrontation, not with a tearful confession, not with the kind of catharsis that movies promised and reality rarely delivered. It came with paperwork, with depositions, with the slow, grinding machinery of justice doing what it was designed to do imperfectly, incompletely, but doing it nonetheless. Victor Harlan resigned before his suspension ended. He took early retirement, forfeiting a portion of his pension in exchange for the department dropping its termination proceedings. He moved to a small town in the Florida Panhandle. Nobody heard from him again. The Hollisters' probation violation hearing resulted in the reinstatement of the enhanced charges. Grant pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He was sentenced 2 months in state prison, reduced from the maximum, but prison nonetheless. Lila received an additional period of probation and hours of community service. The Department of Justice's pattern or practice investigation resulted in a consent decree requiring the Miami-Dade Courthouse Security Division to implement new policies, submit to federal monitoring, and report quarterly on complaint handling and resolution. The monitoring period? Years, long enough to make a difference. Maybe. Kendra's civil lawsuit against Kingsley was settled out of court. The terms were confidential, but the settlement included a formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, something Kingsley's attorneys had fought against until the very end. It also included a contribution to a fund for wrongful conviction victims named after Raymond Hargrove. Raymond himself had died in prison years before Kendra's assault. Heart attack. He never knew that his niece had become a judge. He never knew that she had spent months fighting to clear his name. He never knew that she had won. On the anniversary of the assault, Kendra stood in her chambers, looking out at the Miami skyline. The construction cranes were gone now. New buildings stood where empty lots had been. The city had changed as cities do without asking permission. On her desk, a framed photograph. Her uncle Raymond, young and smiling, standing beside her father at a family gathering. Before the arrest, before the conviction, before decades of silence. Beside the photograph, a letter handwritten on courthouse stationery. Judge Whitaker, I never got to thank you properly. What you did, what you risked, it mattered. Not just to me, to everyone who has been waiting for someone brave enough to ask the right questions. The system is still standing. Maybe it always will be, but it is different now. Cracked, less certain of itself. And that is because of you. I am retiring next month. Years in this building, years of watching things I could not change, but I watched you change them. Thank you for that. Yvette Finch, the woman who had sent the first envelope, the woman who had been transferred to night court for her trouble, The woman who had kept faith when faith seemed foolish. Kendra folded the letter carefully, placed it in her desk drawer, beside years of similar notes she had never mentioned to anyone. The phone on her desk buzzed. Judge Whittaker, your 9 o'clock is here. Send them in. She straightened her robes, adjusted the photograph of her uncle so it faced the door, took a breath. The door opened. A young woman entered, early 20s, nervous, clutching a folder of documents. Behind her, an older woman, who might have been her mother. Judge Whittaker, the young woman said. Thank you for seeing us. What can I do for you? I want to file a complaint about something that happened to me in the parking garage. A security guard. He said I did not belong here. He demanded ID. He threatened to have me arrested. Kendra looked at her face at the fear and anger and determination that flickered behind her eyes. Tell me everything, she said. The young woman began to speak, and Kendra listened as she always listened, as she would always listen. For as long as there were stories that needed telling and systems that needed challenging and people who needed someone, anyone, to believe them. Outside the window, the sun rose over Miami. Inside the chambers, justice, imperfect, incomplete, but justice nonetheless, continued its slow, stubborn work. Epilogue. Months later, the morning was quiet. Kendra parked in the judge's reserved lot. It had been repaired months ago, the construction long finished, and walked through the private entrance. The security guard nodded as she passed. New face, new protocols, new training, small changes, everything and nothing. Her chambers were warm with morning light. On her desk, the usual stack of files, the usual cup of coffee, the usual routine of a life built on procedure and precedent, and something new. An envelope, plain manila, no return address. She opened it. Inside, a single sheet of paper, a news clipping dated days earlier. Former Chief Judge Kingsley pleads guilty to federal charges. Warren Kingsley, former Chief Judge of the 11th Judicial Circuit, pleaded guilty 2 counts of conspiracy and obstruction of justice in connection with the decades-long scheme to suppress civil rights complaints within the Miami-Dade court system. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Kingsley will serve months in federal prison and pay restitution to victims of the scheme. He has also agreed to cooperate with ongoing investigations into other court officials who may have been involved. This case demonstrates that no one is above the law, said the U.S. Attorney in a statement. When public officials abuse their positions to harm the citizens they are sworn to serve, they will be held accountable. Beneath the clipping, handwritten in familiar script, it took decades, but we got there. Thank you, Judge Whittaker, for everything. A friend. Kendra set the clipping down. She thought about her uncle, about Gloria Patterson, about Yvette Finch and Denise Williams and Barbara Chen, and all the other women whose complaints had been buried in a basement room for decades. She thought about Grant and Leila Hollister serving their sentences, facing the consequences of assumptions they had never examined. She thought about Harlan somewhere in the Panhandle, living with whatever remained of his conscience, and she thought about herself, about the woman who had walked into a parking garage years ago, expecting nothing more than an ordinary morning. The system was still standing, but it was different now. Cracked, exposed, held accountable, imperfectly, incompletely, but accountable nonetheless. And that, Kendra understood, was how change happened. Not with explosions, not with revolutions, with cracks. One crack at a time until the whole structure had to be rebuilt. She picked up the first file on her desk, opened it, began to read. Outside her window, the city continued its endless construction, new buildings rising, old foundations shifting, and somewhere in the courthouse basement, room B7 stood empty now, its secrets cataloged, its files distributed to investigators and attorneys and victims who had waited decades to know the truth. The room was just a room now, but the stories it had contained would echo for generations. Justice, she had learned, was not a destination. It was a direction, and she would keep walking toward it, one step at a time, for as long as she had breath to walk. The phone buzzed. "Judge Whitaker, your first hearing is ready. On my way." She stood, adjusted her robes, walked to the door, and Judge Kendra Whitaker, judge, survivor, advocate, stepped into another ordinary day, knowing that ordinary days were where the real battles were fought and won. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you will not miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen